In 1992, something remarkable beamed into television sets, a program that, on the surface, presented a simple concept.
Had to hit start, John. Okay. Start with the knee, kind of a smooth move. 2 bananas, right there. The golden idol. He's going across. Bam, with 52 seconds.
A game show where kids get to physically become part of a video game.
Behind this door is the Video Zone, a place between our world and the video dimension.
As simple as that concept sounds, its implementation was anything but. This show would require groundbreaking technology, laser discs, Amiga computers.
The Amiga is the only machine that can do it. I mean, we'd have to get hardware that was dedicated to do this kind of thing. I mean, we'd actually have to get someone to develop a circuit board and put it together because the Amiga's got the hardware already in it.
Visionary producers that doubled as technical wizards and a charismatic host to tie it all together.
Be the champion, yeah! If I weren't doing the show, I'd be home watching it going, duck down, as everybody does it. How many times did you watch Wheel of Fortune and won, it's Bear, you idiot, it's Bear!
It was half game show,
Pop quiz! All right, hey, in the pop quiz, I get to ask you a question. The correct answer will get you 25 points.
half video game,
I'm here today with Tavis of the yellow team, Megan of the red team, who are about to play our face-off game, Brainstorm.
and all fun. This is the story of a group of pioneers pushing a network to take a risk.
They did not want to have a video game show because they thought back at the time, they thought video games was deadly competition for television. They said, if the video game's on, they're not watching TV.
A spin-off made for Spain that no one seems to ever talk about.
Flying along. That was a great time. Hey, she's up. Bam, there's one ring.
And a show that made the pixelated dreams of 90s kids everywhere a reality. This is the story of Nick Arcade.
Go get him, go! Yeah!
Nickelodeon has come up with a game show that comes with a video twist, one that puts kids right inside, kind of Super Mario Brothers style. Production begins next week. Greg Fox brings us a preview of Nickelodeon Arcade.
We're off. Over the couple weeks. There we are. Good.
Straight from the Nickelodeon cauldron of creative craziness comes a comedy of video calamity, Nickelodeon Arcade.
Nick Arcade was created by James Bethea and Karim Mitef and was one of the first shows filmed at Nickelodeon Studios inside of the Universal Studios theme park in Orlando, Florida. Nick Arcade first aired as a special sneak peek episode at 7 p.m. on January 3rd, 1992. Prior to creating Nick Arcade, James Bethea and Karim Mitef were already working for Nickelodeon on a show called Total Panic. It was during this time that Bethea and Mitef learned about a little-known yet groundbreaking program for Amiga computers called Mandala. Using an Amiga computer and Mandala, Bethea created a game called Swat-a-Bug, which later evolved into Eat-a-Bug, programmed by Dean Friedman. The interactive Eat-a-Bug video game became a popular segment on Total Panic, and laid the groundwork for what would later become Nick Arcade. At the time, Nickelodeon provided their employees a lot of freedom to work on their own projects. So while they were still working at Total Panic, Bethea and Mitef began creating their own TV pilots with the Mandala Software as their centerpiece.
The Mandala Software allowed you to take a chroma key input and digitize it and make it into a sprite. You could get a high contrast image, something shot against a chroma key backdrop, into the computer and it would treat it like a sprite, and this is how you had interactivity.
Mandala was akin to having Microsoft's Kinect in 1990.
The Mandela program is a perfect example of multimedia. The camera shoots the hand, which triggers computer events, in this case, MIDI instruments.
But this software alone wouldn't be enough to produce Nick Arcade. Custom games, as well as a way for the games to communicate with Mandala, would need to be created. But Mandala was a game changer, and Bethea and Mitef knew it. The duo, who had been close friends since high school, put together a pitch for a show similar to Total Panic that would be focused on video games.
Me and James were thinking, well, let's do like a show that's just video game centric. I guess the closest thing would be like what G4 was doing. Very, very close to that. Like a show that would be, segment based, that would have the latest video games, movies, and just be very, and also game element, like something like an Eat-a-Bug or anything that we would develop for in the Mandala system.
They pitched what would be a bit of a variety show, with special guests, sketches, interviews, and games incorporating the Mandala technology. This should have been a slam dunk sell to Nickelodeon, but ironically, Nickelodeon rejecting their pitch may have been the best thing that could have happened.
And we actually pushed that show quite a bit at Nickelodeon, and they just didn't want it. And I remember James coming back one day and was like, "This is like the last time we're going to pitch it." And he says, "They just don't want a show like that." And James goes, "Yeah." He says, they want game shows." And he's like, just sitting there, "They want a game show." I say, "Well, why don't we give them a game show?" And then that's what led to Nick Arcade.
We would have to do it. There was no system at all that existed that could produce a show like this. It was Karim and I as the resident nerds. That was a huge challenge because, unlike today where all the equipment gets along on purpose, scan rates and everything are all compatible between television and film, back then, it didn't. We kind of had to figure out how to make it work.
James and Karim spent 16 months working with their production team to develop not just the show, but also the technology and logistics needed to make Nick Arcade a possibility.
Get over there fast and hit that circuit breaker. All right, now hurry up and get the one.
It's one thing for a kid to be able to play a video game, but to star in it? Whoa! It's called Nick Arcade, the latest from the kid-minded producers at Nickelodeon. The whole concept took 16 months to put together. The computer programming, the sets, and the show are all done here.
It's just like any other video game you might be used to playing at the arcade or at home, except you're in there. It's now you're on the line, and it's you against the computer from the inside.
I was like, after Alien Moonbase.
With a direction for their new show set, Nick Arcade's creators began to carve out the details. They were initially interested in having the entire show take place inside of a video game world, but between technical complexities and Nickelodeon wanting a more easily recognizable game show format that would allow 4 to 5 episodes to be shot in a day, it became clear that that would be impractical.
And also the thing is, the show was designed to be live to tape. So, you don't want to do a lot of post-production because that's expensive. And that was another thing that kind of, drove us to innovate the way we did, because we literally, everything you see in Nick Arcade is happening live. And there's an audience there, and there's contestants there, and there's interactivity between the computers.
And go! All right. Ooh, steam in the face, but he got the first.
Nick Arcade may look primitive by today's standards, but at the time, it was using cutting-edge technology. Sure, the ability to superimpose someone onto a different background had been around for decades, but Nick Arcade did more than that. The contestants played real video games that treated their bodies as sprites, complete with hit detection. Bringing to life a game show that would put kids inside of a video game was no small feat in the early 90s. The end result was a giant 10,000 square foot set, with a large portion of it dedicated to full-scale blue screen stages for kids to play their interactive video games on. At the time, it was the largest blue screen set ever built. Giant blue screen sets in the interactive video games, which were sometimes marketed as virtual reality, were obvious tech components of Nick Arcade, but there were other behind-the-scenes innovations as well.
Panasonic had released a new version of their Laserdisc technology, and James had written a code to allow serial code to go from the computer to trigger the Laserdisc, because it was, but they didn't let us do it the first season. And we're doing it with tape, and we have the poor tape operators, jamming in tape, getting ready to cue things up. The next season they let us do it, and it worked out beautifully.
I know some of you may be mostly interested in learning about how the blue screen Video Zone games at the end of the show worked. So in just a moment, I'll put a timestamp on the screen so that you can skip to that part of the video. But I'd really recommend sticking around for a few minutes, because to truly understand how Nick Arcade worked, I need to take just a few moments to explain how a typical game of Nick Arcade actually went. Each episode of Nick Arcade followed the same format.
These two teams will compete for the right to enter the Video Zone and face that Game Wizard's challenge.
2 teams of 2 kids would be pitted against each other to compete for prizes by answering questions, playing video game challenges, and tackling puzzles. The team with the most points at the end of the show would get to go into the true star of the show, the Video Zone. It was in the Video Zone that kids got to go inside of a video game. Kicking off each episode was a face-off segment. Here, a kid from each team would compete in one of 8 custom-made games, with the winner earning control of the board for their team. The face-off games were developed by Saddleback Graphics and Live Studios, as well as Psygnosis, a developer and publisher best known for Lemmings. After the face-off segment, host Phil Moore would find out a little more about the kids from each team, many of whom seemed to be avid baseball card collectors.
Sarah, I understand you collect baseball cards. Now let's see. John, I understand you collect baseball cards. Now Ryan, my man, I understand that you collect baseball cards. Partner Ryan collects basketball and baseball cards. Oh gosh, well welcome to the show. Your partner Bobby collects baseball cards. Now Ryan too also collects baseball cards. Now this just blew me away. Anand collects baseball cards. Now Brett has a collection of baseball cards. Matt collects baseball cards.
Yeah.
Phil Moore is one of the more memorable parts of Nick Arcade. He would often make up songs between segments. Ooze charisma.
My responsibility, I keep everything going smoothly so everybody sits back and go, this is getting kind of dull. No.
And help make the kids feel comfortable. Phil had to go through 5 auditions before finally being given the nod as host. Nickelodeon had even filmed pilots with a different host before hiring Phil. Phil himself is still active in television and even makes the occasional convention appearance. After we met the teams, we'd be introduced to Mikey and that episode's Mikey's World, which acted as an overworld map for Nick Arcade. There were a total of 11 different themes for Mikey's World, and the team in control would move Mikey in one of 4 directions, revealing the content of the spaces he landed on as the round went on.
You're gonna take Mikey, our video adventurer, and you're gonna move him all around our screen in any direction except diagonally. Now as you do this, you're gonna run into our 4 Ps: points, puzzles, pop quizzes, and prizes. Now watch out, our enemies out there, and if you run into them, you'll lose control of Mikey to the other team. All questions in round 1 are worth 25 points, and the team with the most points at the end of the 2 rounds will then go inside of a video game for a chance to meet our game wizard.
The FCC oversaw that the different spaces, the likelihood of each type of space being revealed, and other aspects of the show followed the same regulations required for other TV game shows.
There was so many regulations that are applied on game shows, and we had to adhere to them. And they were, some of them are pretty extreme. Literally, like randomness, how nothing is planned, and we had to actually program that in to the into our control surfaces and into the way things are decided and how where prizes are and how nothing can be changed.
Right. Okay, Mikey's moving to the right. Video challenge. Yellow team, over to the video challenge area.
This was arguably the most popular part of the show outside of the final interactive video zone. The team that landed on a video challenge space was taken across the Nick Arcade stage to 5 arcade cabinets. They would choose one player from the team to play their choice of one of 5 commercially available or soon to be available games.
Today you have to choose from Dino Land, Battletoads, Chuck Rock, Alpha Mission 2, and Joe and Mac. Which one do you want to play, Joshua?
The player would be tasked with completing the Wizard's Challenge for that game, which usually involves something along the lines of meeting or beating a score within a short time limit, while the non-playing teammate could wager up to 25 of their team's points that their teammate could complete the challenge. Nick Arcade featured games running on a variety of consoles.
That was something Nickelodeon thought we could never do. They said, oh no, Nintendo and Sega, they don't want to be on the same show together. They don't want to do that. But we had already pioneered so many relationships with Total Panic, me and James had, that it was no problem at all. We even had some Neo Geo was on the show.
Mikey would continue to be moved around the board until either the end of it was reached or a goal space was landed on. The team that reached the end of the map or got the goal space earned 50 points. If the round ended without the goal space being reached, then the round would move into sudden death.
That little music right there means that we are almost out of time, so we're going to zip Mikey right to the goal. Pay-yow! And we are now in what we call sudden death. Now I'm going to ask you a question here. The correct answer will get you 50 points and the goal for the end of round 1.
The second round really didn't differ too much from the first. We started off with another face-off game. After that, we were taken to another Mikey's World, which kept the theme from the first round, but the board had a different layout. The points were doubled during this round, and at the end of the second round, the team with the least amount of points was sent home with some consolation prizes.
Listen, red team, you played an excellent game. It was neck and neck down to the wire. You get some great stuff. Andrea, tell them what hot stuff they're leaving with.
British knife.
And the team with the most points earned a ticket into the video zone.
Waiting to challenge you for control of the video zone is one of the game wizards, is it? Murloc, Scotia, or Mongo?
In the video zone, the team would have 60 seconds to complete 3 levels, with the final level being that day's game wizard. Each level that they completed earned the team a prize, as well as $50 for each teammate. Now, the final grand prize of the show was usually a trip to either Universal Studios Florida, and mind you, the kids were already there at Universal Studios Florida filming the show, so I'm not sure how much of a prize that was. Another frequent prize was a trip to Space Camp. Now, lots of Nickelodeon shows gave away trips to Space Camp, and supposedly this is due to somebody at Nickelodeon ordering too many trips.
In level 1, the first player has to collect 3 bunches of bananas sitting high in the jungle trees. The toucans, snakes, piranhas, and coconut-throwing monkeys will all take your power. Go under the waterfall or touch the golden idol, and a rope will appear to help you over it.
The interactive games in the video zone weren't QuickTime events being manually triggered by the show's staff. They were real video games that the kids were actually playing with their bodies. These games worked by placing the kids on a large blue screen set, and they were then shot head-on. The sets were built to the scale of the game, with some as large as 30 feet wide and 2 stories tall. The blue screen footage was then sent through a high-end video switching system that would then route that video through a keying system called Ultimat that would replace the background with the game's graphics. The interaction between the players and the game was made possible by taking the high contrast, pure white on black key signal of the player movements in Ultimat and feeding them into a combination of software and hardware built around Commodore Amiga computers and the Mandala Software. Mandala used the high contrast video to interactively pair it with the graphical objects the computer was generating, similar to iToy for the PlayStation 2. The end result was that the games would basically treat the players as sprites within the game, allowing players to have hit detection within the game's environment. These games were filmed completely live to tape without pauses or post-editing. Now that is a very basic, rudimentary explanation of what went into making the Video Zone games possible. BroadcastBeat.com has a great article explaining some of the more technical aspects in great detail. I'll leave a link in the video's description to where you can learn more about the show's more technical aspects. Though many of the characters and concepts in Nick Arcade were originally sketched or designed by Bethea or Mitef themselves, most of the custom game sprites and graphic work viewers saw were created by Kurt Tomanian, who worked as a graphics artist on many games from the 80s and 90s. The games were also principally designed by Nick Arcade's creators, but programmed by Dean Friedman, an accomplished musician who also created the music. Nick Arcade filmed several episodes with stars from other shows filmed at Nickelodeon Studios, such as Clarissa Explains It All.
It's a special day in the arcade because we're welcoming 4 of the cast members of Nickelodeon's Clarissa Explains It All.
A very young Joey Fatone also competed in an episode of Nick Arcade long before he was a celebrity.
Now, Joseph, I understand you like to sing and you like to act. Do you like sing around in the shower or in a choir or something?
Yeah, a school and everything.
Nick Arcade was a ratings hit for Nickelodeon, but although the network aired reruns through September of 1997 on its Game & Sports channel, aside from 4 pilots, only 84 episodes spread over 2 seasons were produced. But Nick Arcade's journey doesn't end there. After Nick Arcade's success, a deal between Nickelodeon's parent company and a production house named Video Zapping brought a Nick Arcade spin-off titled Zona de Juego to Spain's TVE3 channel. 78 episodes of Zona de Juego were filmed locally in Madrid, with Bethea and Mitef's production company handling the conversion of all production elements, including the implementation of the interactive hardware package in TVE's Madrid studios. But once again, Nick Arcade's story doesn't end there either. In 2015, the creators of Nick Arcade, Karim Mitef and James Bethea, alongside host Phil Moore, launched a Kickstarter for Nth Level, a modern version of Nick Arcade. Despite what seemed like a lot of public interest and plenty of media coverage, Nth Level fell well below their $350,000 goal. And yet, this too may not be the end of Nick Arcade's story. More recently, WWE superstar Xavier Woods has been campaigning to resurrect Nick Arcade with him as the host.
I want nothing more in this life but to become King of the Ring and to become the host of the new version of Nick Arcade.
This isn't just some random wrestler looking for a new gig. Xavier Woods is a well-known personality in the gaming community who's competed in gaming tournaments, runs a very large gaming channel on YouTube, and is a part of arguably one of the most popular groups in WWE history, The New Day. I for one think he's the perfect successor to Phil Moore and hope he's successful.
I mean, that show was done, really with a lot of love. Care. We really wanted to be the best it could be. I still have people today, tell me, I got into the video business because of Nick Arcade, or, I got into video games because of Nick Arcade, or they're actually producing, video game titles, or are involved in, the industry, and actually creating titles because of Nick Arcade.
Nick Arcade epitomized the dreams of many young gamers in the 90s. Sure, it was a chance to win money, prizes, earn a trip to space camp, or maybe just play a Neo Geo game your parents would never ever think of shelling out the money for. But more importantly than that, it was a chance to go inside of a video game. And for many of us in the early 90s, there was no higher calling than that. I want to thank Bilal Smith for allowing me to use excerpts from his interview with Karim Mitef from his documentary, Nickelodeon Studios, Past, Present, and Future. I'll leave links below in the description where you can find out more information about Bilal's documentary. I also want to thank G to the Next Level for reading the quotes from James Bethea. G to the Next Level has an awesome YouTube channel. I can't recommend it enough. If you like my channel, I'm sure you'll like his. I also want to thank Ethan and Dylan Daly from the Gaming Alexandria Discord server. They were super helpful in helping me to verify some information as I got close to finishing up this video, so thanks a bunch. Finally, if you want to reach out to me directly, you can do so on Twitter @WrestlesGaming. If you want to support the channel monetarily, you can do that at Patreon, patreon.com/wrestlingwithgaming. But most of all, thank you for watching.